is widely believed that after the rapture, a 7-year tribulation period will begin, and a world leader will appear, probably in Europe, making a covenant with the Jews, allowing them to rebuild the temple and resume animal sacrifices. After 3.5 years, he will enter the Jerusalem temple, proclaim himself to be God, and during the second 3.5 years, evil will spread, Russia will attack Israel from the north, in response to which Europe and China will send huge armies to the Middle East for the mother of all Donnybrooks, the Battle of Armageddon. We have already seen that the rapture notion is probably not a valid teaching of Scripture, nor is the two-phase second coming and 7-year tribulation period allegedly to fall between them. So, does the Bible really teach a single final monster called Antichrist? I come across internet article after article where this single end-time Antichrist character is the headliner, but all of the details come from passages other than where the inspired writers actually use the word. They talk about Antichrist, but the content is pulled from Daniel's discussion of 2 little horns, the he in Daniel 9:27, Paul's man of lawlessness, and the beast in Revelation 13 and 17. Isn't it strange that all of the content sewn together to create this popular final villain comes from all over the Bible, everywhere, but the passages where the term is actually used? Why would that be? Wouldn't the most logical passages upon which to base your understanding of Antichrist be the passages where the term actually appears and is discussed by the Bible writers? You would think so. Could it be that the passages where the term Antichrist actually appears are ignored because what the Bible writers said about it has nothing to do with the popular notion? Antichrist is a fantastic example of how biblical terms and phrases can be hijacked from their context, redefined, and then plugged into the popular humanly devised scenario so as to make it appear to be biblical to those who eagerly buy the books promoting that story. Let's not beat around the bush on this one. I'm going to begin by showing you all of the places where the Greek word antichristos, transliterated as Antichrist, appears in the Bible, and we will see what the Bible writers understood about it. The Greek term antichristos appears only in John's first and second letters. It does not appear anywhere else in Scripture. No, not even in the book of Revelation. The first occurrence is in 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 and 19.
Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come. Therefore, we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were not of us, for if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out, that it might become plain that they all are not of us.
It is common for those promoting the popular notion to assume that, as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, means that John was endorsing the idea of a single future Antichrist as a valid belief. The first problem with that is that noted New Testament scholar F.F. Bruce said that the term Antichristos has not been found in Greek literature prior to John's use of it in this passage. In other words, we have no idea what they had heard, but it does sound as though John is trying to correct their understanding, just as Paul also had to counter other erroneous ideas about the end. They had heard that Antichrist was coming, but John wanted them to understand that there were already a bunch of them present at that time. Second, notice that John did not associate the last hour or last time period with the appearance of a single Antichrist in the future, but with his own time and the many Antichrists already present. Third, you need to notice that John's first comment about Antichrist continues into verse 19, for the pronoun they refers to the many Antichrists already present, and he clearly identifies who he's referring to. "They went out from us," tells us that he is talking about apostates, people who had left the Christian community. The second occurrence is found in 1 John 2, verse 22.
Who is the liar, but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son.
John used a definite article here. The Antichrist is the person who denies the Father and Son. Since denial of God the Father and Son is not limited to one person at the end of history, there have been, obviously, many Antichrists. Third occurrence comes in 1 John 4, verses 1 through 3.
Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this, you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming, and now is in the world already.
The spirit of Antichrist is associated with false prophets, already in the world at that time, like the Cerinthian Gnostics, who denied the incarnation, Jesus come in the flesh. Which you heard is coming again leaves us wondering, is what they had heard, that there is one Antichrist coming, correct? We don't know. But we do know that he is trying to get their attention focused on what was already present in their time. The final occurrence is in 2 John verse 7.
For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist.
As with the previous passage, John has in mind deceivers who deny the coming of Jesus in the flesh. Whoever does that is the deceiver and the Antichrist. And that's it, folks. That is every time the word appears in the Greek text. Did John say anything to associate Antichrist with a 7-year tribulation period, making a future covenant with the Jews so they can rebuild the temple and resume animal sacrifices, proclaiming himself to be God, leading the world into the bloodiest conflict in human history, or even Jesus' return? A one-word answer: nope. Can you see why the folks promoting the popular notion take the word Antichrist and then ignore what John had to say about it and go elsewhere to find stuffing to fill out their fictional scarecrow? The best candidate for a single evil person to come later is Paul's man of lawlessness.
Let no one in any way deceive you. For the day of the Lord will not come, unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God, or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he may be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, only he, who now restrains, will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth, and bring to an end, by the appearance of his coming, that is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power, and signs, and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness, for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, so as to be saved.
As with John's first reference to Antichrist is coming, it certainly would help to know what else Paul told the Thessalonian believers about this, verse 5. But all we have is what he wrote them in this letter. The phrase man of lawlessness appears nowhere else in Scripture, so let's pay attention to what he wrote. The man of lawlessness sounds like a single individual, the one, in verse 6. And since the Lord will take care of this individual when he returns, verse 8, then he is the best candidate for an end-time bad guy. However, Paul said this one was being restrained by something in verse 6, and the restrainer is a he, verse 7. All we know is that he appears in God's temple, opposes God, and exalts himself as the highest being. In the Gospels and Book of Acts, two Greek words, iros and naos, seem to be used interchangeably for the Jerusalem temple, although iros is the word associated with the priesthood, while naos tends to refer to the actual place of God's dwelling. However, in the New Testament letters, the word naos is not used for the Jerusalem temple, but for the church and the heavenly temple as where God's Spirit truly dwells. Even in Revelation 11, verses 1 and 2, the temple, naos, altar, and worshipers seem to be distinguished by not being measured for judgment, whereas the Herodian temple buildings and courts in Jerusalem would all be trampled and destroyed in 70 A.D. When Paul spoke of the temple this man of lawlessness would appear in, it is the naos, the term that he used for the church as God's temple. That is why the Greek church fathers, who read the Greek New Testament, believed the man of lawlessness would be someone to appear later within the church. The popularizers assume that Paul's man of lawlessness is the same as the Antichrist that John's readers believed in. However, if we pay attention to the details, it is highly unlikely that this is the case, for there are significant differences between the characters. Paul's character appears to be a single individual, restrained by someone for a while, but would later appear within the church claiming to be God and be supported by satanic power and signs. John didn't mention any of those things, but said the Antichrist was already present in large numbers, had left the Christian community, denied the Father and Son, and denied the Incarnation. Neither John's Antichrist nor Paul's man of lawlessness are portrayed as ruling civil authorities, and neither of them are said to persecute or kill Christians, or lead the world into a major war. Paul seems to have been a lot more concerned about the man of lawlessness deceiving those who do not have a love for truth. In fact, he even associated the man of lawlessness with a deluding influence sent by God for those who are not interested in truth.
The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power, and false signs, and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refused to love the truth, and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned, who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness.
The best way not to be taken in by this deceiver, and it's not the rapture, is to stick with apostolic teaching.
So then, brothers, stand firm, and hold to the traditions that you were taught by us, either by our spoken word, or by our letter.
I guess John's Antichrist and Paul's man of lawlessness could be the same thing if you ignore what John and Paul said about it, but have overwhelming faith in the uninspired paperback books and TV preachers who keep claiming that they are the same. In the book of Revelation, John mentions the beast a number of times in chapters 11, 13 through 17, and 19. But again, you will find no mention of a 7-year tribulation period, making a covenant with the Jews so they can rebuild their temple and resume sacrifices, proclaiming himself God in the Jerusalem temple, or leading the world into a huge war in the Middle East in which Europe, Russia, and China will try to destroy each other. So forget that stuff and wrestle with what's written in Scripture. If we allow the book of Revelation to provide its own context, we're told that after Christ is born, escapes Satan's attempt to kill him in infancy, and is exalted to heaven's throne, Satan will be cast down and will persecute the saints through a 10-horned, 7-headed beastly kingdom. What follows will be pretty heavy sledding for many not well-versed in Scripture and history, but I include it for those who are ready for the deep end of the pool. We are given enough information in Revelation 13 verses 2 and 7, rising out of the sea, a lion, bear, leopard, a beast with 10 horns that makes war on the saints, to recognize that the beast John beholds arising from the sea to be indwelt by the dragon as a tool for persecuting Christians is the fourth kingdom from Daniel 7, which points to the Roman Empire. It is a kingdom with 7 heads, which are kings in the context of John's time. 5 had already ruled, number 6 was ruling when John wrote this, and number 7 was still future. And 10 horns, which are also kings to come later. The 10 horns receive their kingdoms with the beast for 1 hour. But is that all 10 at the same time, or does each one get a short time allied with the persecuting beast? We are told that the beast is an 8th king, but one of the 7. Since number 8 is one of the 7, it appears that he must be another Roman emperor. Since it seems that the focus in Revelation 13 and 17 is on Roman persecution of Christianity, if John wrote Revelation in the 90s, the king currently ruling, number 6, would be Domitian, who persecuted Christians through a priesthood that directed worship to his family with talking statues. Christians, especially in the 7 churches in Western Asia Minor to which Revelation was addressed, were economically pressured by cities and trade guilds, demanding worship of their patron gods and goddesses, and also cities eager to please Rome by emphasizing emperor worship. After Domitian, there were 2 emperors that persecuted Christianity empire-wide, so number 7 could be Decius, and number 8 could be Diocletian. Or the 10 horns may be the emperors that instigated 10 periods of persecution prior to the legalization of Christianity in 313 AD. As for how the beast, which is clearly an empire with many rulers, heads, and crowned horns in Revelation 13, could eventually become personified as a single individual beast in 1711, we probably need to understand how Roman emperor worship developed. From Julius Caesar to Octavian, who was later given the title Augustus, emperors did not want to be seen as superhuman beings. Caligula and Nero were not all there, so it is with Domitian in the late 1st century that we find the first emperor actually seeking to be worshipped as a god. However, as we move into the 2nd century, the decline of the empire became an obvious problem, and as an attempt to promote the unity of the empire, Rome came to be equated with and personified in the emperor. With emperor worship, the imperial beast became an emperor beast. As loyalty to Rome came to be expressed by worshiping the emperor, Christians refusing to do so were viewed as bad citizens and a threat to the empire. That's why they were persecuted. While Revelation 13:7 says that God would allow the beast to attack Christianity, in 1714 we learn that this would fail. On the other hand, the 10 horns partner with the 8th king or beast in a common purpose, and this common purpose originated from God. They are his agent to destroy the great city harlot Babylon, which is the great city ruling over the earth where the Lord was crucified, and known for killing the saints and prophets, unfaithful Jerusalem. So, should we view Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, and the beast in Revelation, according to popular end times expectations, as parallel descriptions of a single end-time monster to come just before Jesus returns? Simple answer: nope. No matter what his readers may have heard, the Apostle John's understanding of Antichrist was that there were already many of them in his time. They had left the church, they denied the Father and Son, and denied the Incarnation. Paul's man of lawlessness, while restrained in Paul's time, sounds like a single person to come later on, appearing within the church and claiming to be God, supported by satanic signs and wonders, and is a deluding influence sent by God for those who do not love truth. John's beast, in Revelation is the imperial Roman government, with many heads or rulers, persecutes the followers of Jesus, and acts as God's agent to destroy unfaithful Jerusalem. Along with the timing difference between the Antichrist, already many, and the man of lawlessness, restrained until later, the relationship of each to the church is enough to make the point. The Antichrist had left the church. The man of lawlessness would arise within it, and the beast persecutes the church. From what the Bible writers actually said about Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, and the beast of Revelation, it baffles me how anyone making any claim to serious biblical scholarship could think these all refer to the same single political ruler at the end of the church age. That idea had to originate somewhere else. In Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream in which a statue of a man was divided into 4 sections of different materials, which was brought to an end when struck in the feet by a stone, which then grew into a great mountain, filling the earth. Daniel explained that the 4 sections of the statue represented 4 kingdoms that would rule the Middle East until the Messiah appeared. The first was Nebuchadnezzar's Neo-Babylonian Empire, to be followed by an empire combining an imbalanced pair of nations, Medo-Persia, then a third that would conquer a large amount of territory rapidly, Alexander the Great's Greek Empire, and finally Rome. In the days of this 4th and last empire, God's Messiah would appear and establish his everlasting kingdom. When Jesus appeared in the days of the Roman Empire, he declared that the time for the kingdom had arrived, that his casting out of demons indicated that it was already present. He described its nature in parables and declared that it would be established with power within the lifetime of those who saw and listened to him. After Pentecost, Paul told believers that they had already been transferred into the kingdom, and John said that Jesus was the ruler of the kings of the earth and had made his followers a priestly kingdom, with he and his late first century readers already participating in the tribulation, kingdom, and perseverance associated with Jesus. In Daniel 7, verses 1 through 14, the same 4 kingdoms are portrayed, but this time as beasts arising from the sea, similar to the imagery in Revelation 13. In verse 8, 10 horns arise from the 4th beast and also another little horn, and it is here that we see parallels with Revelation 13 and 17. The actual vision, verses 1 through 14, is the easiest part, for it is again in the context of the 4th beast, Rome, that the Son of Man is exalted to heaven's throne to rule over an international kingdom of believers, which Jesus and his apostles saw as fulfilled with his first coming. The first explanation also is clear. The 4 beasts are 4 kingdoms, and the saints will receive an eternal kingdom. For me, the murkiest place in Scripture has long been where Daniel requested a further explanation of the 4th beast, because it is here that we encounter confusing similarities and differences with Revelation 13 and 17. First, the similarities. The historical context is the 4th kingdom from Daniel's time, which would be Rome. Second, the 10 horns or kings arise out of this 4th beast or kingdom. Third, there is another horn that arises later. And fourth, God is blasphemed and the saints are persecuted. And here are the differences. Concerning the 4th beast, Daniel says that it is different from the previous 3 kingdoms, whereas in Revelation, we find that the 4th beast includes elements from the previous 3. As to the little horn and 8th king, in Daniel, he is different from the previous kings. In Revelation, he is one of the 7. In Daniel, he arises after Akar, the 10. In Revelation, the 10 arise with the 8th king. In Daniel, the little horn subdues 3 of the previous 10. In Revelation, All 10 give their authority to the beast, and then they all work together in a common purpose. For blasphemy and persecution, it appears that the little horn alone blasphemes God and persecutes the saints, whereas in Revelation, the multi-headed, multi-horned beast blasphemes and persecutes the saints. And then there's some unique elements. In Daniel, it says that the little horn seeks to make alterations in times and laws, for which there is no parallel in Revelation. Revelation says that the 8th king, or beast, and 10 accomplish God's purpose by destroying the great harlot city Babylon, and there's no parallel for that in Daniel. There are sufficient major parallels to conclude that Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 and 17 are referring to the Roman Empire's destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the persecution of Christians from 65 to 313 AD, which would have been major concerns to the early church. What I do not see is any valid reason for putting any of this into the future from our perspective. While some very careless speculators associate the little horn in Daniel 8 with their imagined future Antichrist, we're given enough information to know that this is not the same one as in the previous vision, nor does it refer to anything still to come in our future. The conflict between the major players, the ram and the he-goat, is clearly identified as that which would unfold between Medo-Persia and Greece between 490 and 142 BC, long before Jesus' first coming. We are told that the ram represents Medo-Persia, verse 20. The he-goat refers to Alexander the Great's Greek Empire, which broke up into 4 sections, verses 21 and 22, and the little horn would arise in the latter part of the Greek era. This fits the rise of Antiochus IV in Seleucid Syria, an arrogant ruler who called himself God Manifest, assaulted Judaism, and removed the daily temple sacrifice for about 3.5 years, between 164 and 160 BC. After examining, in their literary and historical context, all of the suggested references to a final monstrous Antichrist figure, only Paul's man of lawlessness fits the picture of a single deceiver to arise towards the end of the church age. However, Paul mentioned him only in 2 Thessalonians 2, and there said nothing relating to the popular expectations for this character. There's not a hint of him allied with 10 other rulers or kingdoms, making a covenant with the Jews, ending sacrifice, persecuting believers, or leading the world into a major war. However, Paul did associate this character with a divinely sent delusion for those unwilling to believe the truth about Jesus, a fact from the text that is hardly ever mentioned. So I concluded that the popular notion of many characters from all over the Bible pointing ahead to a single end times monster called Antichrist is nothing more than a theological Frankenstein's monster. Just like the competition to find the most signs of Jesus' return, throughout much of the church age, speculators have tried to outdo others in identifying every villain in biblical history as a prediction of or an allusion to this imagined monster to come. Irenaeus identified Antichrist with Paul's man of lawlessness, the abomination of desolation, Daniel's little horn, the king of fierce countenance, the one to come in his own name, the beast from the abyss, and claimed that he would be a Jew from the tribe of Dan. Hippolytus of Rome adopted Irenaeus' list and added that Antichrist was also to be associated with the Assyrian king Sennacherib, an unnamed future king of Babylon, the prince of Tyre, the partridge, and the one who sends ambassadors in vessels of papyrus. Concerning Hippolytus, F.F. Bruce noted that, plainly, exegesis has slipped its moorings to drift in the sea of imagination. This notion that every evil character mentioned in the Bible is a prediction or foreshadowing of a single final character continues into our time. But why do they stop there? Surely the Antichrist must be prefigured in Cain, who persecuted his righteous brother, Nimrod, the mighty hunter, the Pharaoh who tried to kill off the Jewish boys in Moses' time, the oppressors of Israel during the Judges era, Cushan-Rishathaim and Eglon, and Goliath, the Assyrian kings Tiglath-Pileser III, Shalmaneser V, Sargon II, Esarhaddon, and Herod the Great, Genghis Khan, Rasputin, Hitler, Mussolini, Saddam Hussein, and so on and so on. There's about as much biblical justification for linking them to Antichrist as most of the other characters suggested. But uninformed imaginations emotionally committed to a popular idea are very difficult to dislodge.
Listen, dummy. Famous preachers who write books and have big churches teach this, and lots of people sincerely believe it, so it must be true.
Just like Frankenstein's monster, the modern concept of Antichrist is a fictional character composed of disconnected bits and pieces from a number of unrelated bad boys from all over the Bible, sewn together, brought to life by a gazillion volts of end times imagination, and then loosed upon unsuspecting readers to instill fear and promote a lot of paperback book sales in those wanting to know more about this character which the Bible does not really describe. And as Frankie would say,
No more. Don't do Frankenstein theology.
if you really want to identify the Antichrist, then the Apostle John said we should be looking for those who leave the Christian community, deny the Father and Son, and deny the incarnation of God in Jesus, as many of them have been around for a long time. You might also need to be concerned about identifying an individual who arises, or has already arisen, within the church, opposes or replaces the biblical God, and puts himself at the highest central spot with phony signs and wonders. The people who will be deceived by this character are those who do not have a love for truth and do not hold to the original apostles' teaching. So we are back to a familiar theme in Scripture. Over the centuries, there has been a persistent problem in the Judeo-Christian community with teachers who are popular because they tell people appealing falsehoods that they want to believe. Rather than blindly trusting human teachers to explain the Bible, it would be better to trust the Bible to help you identify the human teachers that are worth listening to. My advice is to stop trusting uninspired paperback books, TV preachers, and videos, even mine, and get your mind and heart into the book. If Jesus is the Messiah and God incarnate, and the apostles are his selected, authorized, and inspired executors, then the New Testament writings are the only inspired commentary we have on God's larger plan, what the prophets were predicting, and what we should still expect to occur in the future.